The galaxy had always moved slowly. The Zorith coalition, made up of over 40 alien species, had ruled the stars for thousands of years using one rule above all. Wait. Wait for approval. Wait for consensus. Wait for the endless red tape of diplomacy to clear before anything happened. So when their deep space listening stations picked up new, faster-than-light communication signals from an unknown system called Sol, they began the usual process, cataloging the origin, forming an analysis committee, and preparing to wait 50 years before a proper first contact could be discussed. But humans didn't wait. Only 3 months later, human ship the ISS Endeavour appeared above Zorith Prime without announcement, ceremony, or even a transmission in the standard diplomatic frequency. Instead, the signal they broadcast was short, direct, and incredibly confusing to the aliens listening. We detected a trade hub. We brought goods. Let's deal. Chaos broke out across the Coalition Council. Analysts scrambled. Language interpreters tried to decode Earth Standard English, and security protocols were raised. Some thought the ship might be a trick, a pirate vessel posing as diplomats. Others feared it was a mistake, that the humans had no idea what they were doing. But inside the Endeavour, Captain Mara Voss stood calmly on the bridge, scanning the planet below while sipping her tea. She didn't need permission. She had a cargo bay full of advanced tech, including water purification nanites, medical patches that healed wounds in minutes, and high-efficiency solar thread. Within days, her team had reached out to fringe colonies. On the edge of Coalition space, the kind of places the central government usually ignored, their human engineers quickly set up field hospitals, cleaned toxic rivers, and traded simple items like clean water systems for alien tech called data crystals. No contracts were signed. No councils were asked. The humans simply helped hand, then moved on. Word spread fast among the outer colonies. These humans didn't talk much, but when they arrived, things got better. For the Zorith leaders back on Prime, this was terrifying. They weren't used to change coming from outside their carefully managed process, and yet none could deny the results. Coalition scientists, watching the field reports, couldn't understand how humans moved so quickly or why they seemed to take joy in action over approval. On the ground, alien settlers who once waited years for help were now planting crops using tools printed by human machines. Rumors started. Some said the humans were preparing a takeover. Others believed they were scouts for a future invasion. But the truth was stranger and more unsettling to the Council. The humans weren't planning anything at all. They were just being human. Captain Voss didn't explain much. She let her actions speak. She didn't ask for recognition or seats at the table. Her crew wasn't wearing medals or military ranks. They wore tool belts and grease-stained jackets. They fixed things. They built. They made things work. Coalition had never seen anything like it. The question hanging in the air now wasn't, what do the humans want? It was, how far are they willing to go? And as the Endeavour's engines powered up for their next jump, somewhere in deep space, the Council realized something both exciting and terrifying. The age of waiting was over. The Zorith Council remained locked in discussion rooms, their marble chambers echoing with endless voices as they argued over how to deal with the humans. Yet the stars beyond their windows were already changing. While their committees debated policy, human companies and independent crews had begun quietly spreading across the less regulated regions of space, setting up small microbases on neglected planets, where help had been promised by the Coalition for years but never arrived. On Velinor 4, a planet suffocating under its own outdated regulations and constant energy shortages, a human team landed without formal approval, led by an engineer named Juno Reyes. Her crew didn't attend meetings or wait for planetary council votes. They simply got to work. In just 6 days, they restored orbital power by patching a decaying solar relay network that had been offline for 6 years. The Coalition had sent dozens of inspectors, consultants, and technical advisors to Velinor 4 in the past. But none had accomplished what the humans did with tools, grit, and sheer willpower. The locals were stunned. They had grown used to long lines, denied requests, and problems passed from one department to another. But these humans worked side by side with alien mechanics, using translator drones and hand signals when words failed, showing how to reroute energy and stabilize failing systems with techniques that seemed almost improvised, but they worked. When the lights returned to Velinor's capital city and the skies lit up with the glow of functional satellites, the people cheered, not for their government, but for the uninvited guests who had brought change without ceremony. News began to spread, first as rumors on back-channel networks. Then, through mainstream broadcasts, humans were helping where the coalition could not. But instead of praise, the council-controlled media released cautionary stories warning against reckless human interventions and the dangers of unregulated aid. The broadcasts showed edited clips of human tools malfunctioning or misinterpreted statements twisted into threats. Yet none of it slowed the shift happening in people's minds. The aliens were not afraid of the humans, they were inspired. There was something deeply attractive about a species that didn't ask what was allowed, but instead asked what was possible. While politicians argued and journalists warned, workers on distant worlds were watching how human crews solved problems. They didn't bring rules or hierarchy, they brought solutions. Meanwhile, aboard the ISS Endeavour, Captain Mara Voss observed everything with quiet confidence. Her ship had become more than a trade vessel, it was a symbol of motion, a reminder that help did not need permission. She stood at the observation window as another cargo pod detached, carrying fresh supplies and blueprints to a new colony, requesting support. Her crew was tired, but focused, driven by purpose more than orders. During a crew meeting, Voss addressed them not with formal speeches, but with simple, clear truth. The universe isn't a museum, it's a frontier. And frontiers don't wait. Those words spread far beyond the Endeavour. Someone recorded them and shared them across several alien networks, and soon they were quoted in places Voss had never been. Chintz, engineers, students, even junior Coalition officers, many were starting to think the humans weren't just breaking the rules. They were revealing how unnecessary those rules had become, but not everyone welcomed the change. Behind closed doors, the Zorth Council grew uneasy. They couldn't punish the humans without provoking unrest in the colonies. They couldn't admit failure without losing authority. So they waited and hoped that humanity would slow down. But humanity wasn't slowing, it was accelerating. The Council had always believed progress was something to manage. But to humans, progress was something to chasten. It was catching. Fire across the stars, the Zorth Council. After months of delay and mounting pressure from internal factions, finally decided to act. But their response came far too late to matter in the way they had hoped. By the time they issued official cease orders to halt all unauthorized human operations across Coalition space, humanity had already moved far beyond needing approval. Through swift actions and genuine results, human teams had earned trust and formed direct alliances with a growing number of independent colonies and outer rim systems, many of which had long felt forgotten by the central authority. These planets weren't formally seceding from the Coalition. They were turning their attention toward the newcomers, who didn't talk about change, they delivered it. Frustrated and alarmed, the Council handed emergency powers to Admiral D. Vectalo, a rigid and aggressive military figure known for enforcing control with an iron will. Acting under the claim of preserving peace, Talo deployed a blockade fleet around Javarna 3, a resource-rich mining planet that had recently accepted aid in technology from a human logistics crew. Supplies stopped. Communication lines were jammed. Council officials said it was temporary. But to the people of Javarna 3, it felt like punishment for accepting help. Back on the ISS Endeavour, Captain Mara Voss received word of the blockade. And while others might have paused or negotiated, she gave a quiet nod and opened the ship's navigation interface. The solution would not be war, it would be innovation. Within hours, a modified human freighter equipped with a prototype slipstream jump drive, a technology that hadn't been tested in real-world conflict zones, launched toward Javarn 3. The move was risky, dangerous even, but it worked. The ship blinked past the blockade in a burst of light and distortion, slipped into the upper atmosphere, offloaded critical medical and power supplies, and vanished before Admiral Talo's sensors could get a lock. The admiral was furious. He declared it an act of war, ordered pursuit, and demanded reinforcements. But the reaction within his own ranks was not what he expected. Officers who had seen the joy on alien faces when power returned, or who had watched planetary systems stabilize under human assistance, began to question the orders they were given. "Are we really protecting the people?" one lieutenant asked quietly, "or just protecting old rules?" The question echoed. It wasn't only the military asking. Its students, workers, scientists across the coalition began discussing it in forums and gathering in learning halls. A new movement was born, calling itself the Doers, young aliens from dozens of species. Inspired by what they saw in the humans, adopted a simple motto taken from something Captain Voss had once said during a broadcast act: adapt, advance. They began creating small community groups, building local solutions without waiting for official approval, following the same energy they had seen in human crews. Coalition leaders tried to discredit the movement, calling it dangerous and chaotic. But the more they resisted, the more it grew. Back in the stars, more human ships joined the effort, not with weapons, but with cargo bays full of tools, medicine, and communication beacons. The blockade around Javarna 3 remained, but it was becoming meaningless. Human vessels found creative paths through hidden routes and jump corridors, using knowledge shared by alien traders and navigation experts who now saw humanity not as outsiders, but as partners. Admiral Tallow doubled down, demanding full military authority. But even within the council, his voice was losing strength. Some members started wondering aloud if perhaps the humans weren't invading, they were leading, but leading without demanding power. As these questions spread, the tension in the galaxy thickened. The spark had been struck, but no one knew yet what the fire would burn down or what it would build in its place. The council, once the unquestioned authority across the stars, now found itself facing something it had never planned for, a future that didn't ask permission to begin. And somewhere aboard the Endeavor, Captain Mara Voss reviewed the growing network of allied planets, forming a quiet web of cooperation, innovation, and hope. She said nothing, but her eyes held a steady certainty. This wasn't the beginning of a war. It was the beginning of something much harder to stop as the months passed. The once solid foundation of the Zorth coalition began to quietly crack, not from war or rebellion, but from something far more unexpected: hope. Entire systems, once dependent on the Council's slow-moving assistance and outdated regulations, began opting out of centralized control, not in protest, but in pursuit of something better. Messages arrived daily from distant worlds, not demanding independence, but requesting open trade and collaboration directly with Earth. The humans hadn't forced these changes with armies or fleets. They hadn't raised flags over capitals or claimed territory. Instead, they sent educators, architects, scientists, and engineers. On worlds where ancient power plants lay dormant, human technicians worked with local volunteers to restart them. On planets with struggling education systems, humans opened schools not to teach their culture, but to encourage critical thinking, science, and shared progress. Instead of imposing their ways, humans offered tools and knowledge, then stepped aside to let others build with them. What shocked the Council most wasn't how fast things changed, but how willingly. Alien civilizations that had remained stagnant for centuries suddenly began evolving. They created hybrid technologies by blending human invention with their own traditions, developed new forms of clean energy, expanded communication networks, and even launched joint missions to explore uncharted sectors of the galaxy. The movement had no leader, no central command, just a growing belief that waiting for permission had wasted too many years. The phrase "the human model" became common across star charts, symbolizing a way of life where progress came through action, not approval. The coalition tried to counter the shift by issuing new reforms, but few listened. What authority did the Council hold now when ordinary citizens could see with their own eyes what real change looked like? At the center of this quiet revolution was the crew of the ISS Endeavor, who continued moving from world to world, not as heroes, but as catalysts. They stayed only as long as they were needed, then moved on, leaving behind ideas instead of orders. Eventually, a summit was called on a neutral space station orbiting a binary star system. Leaders from dozens of planets, human and alien alike, gathered not to rewrite the rules, but to understand the new direction the galaxy had taken. Cameras recorded as Captain Mara Voss stepped forward, standing without military uniform or grand title, and delivered a short, unforgettable speech. "We're not here to lead your people," she said, her voice steady and clear. "We're here to show that you don't need permission to make things better." That single sentence echoed through the halls and across broadcast networks like a spark in dry grass. Back on Earth, the story was different. Most people had no idea they were changing the course of galactic history. They were too busy building, experimenting, fixing problems, and exploring new frontiers. To them, action was simply normal. Governments didn't direct these efforts. Individuals did. Scientists building gravity filters in their garage, medics joining volunteer missions, students uploading open-source designs for alien-compatible farming machines. Earth wasn't trying to lead the stars. It just couldn't help moving forward. That forward motion, so natural to humans, was reshaping everything. Even among the council, some began to reconsider their stance. They watched as planets, once dependent on endless bureaucratic loops, now thrived through mutual cooperation. They saw former critics of the humans, now asking how to work with them. Some council members still held on to the old ways, hoping things would return to how they were. But deep down, they knew the truth. The future no longer belonged to those who waited. It belonged to those who acted. 100 years had passed since the first human ship broke through the quiet order of the Zorth Coalition. The galaxy was no longer the same. Where once systems waited for centuries to receive attention from the central powers, now they moved with confidence and collaboration. The old coalition had dissolved slowly and quietly, its influence fading like echoes in an empty hall, replaced, not by Earth's government, by something much more surprising, a shared union of countless worlds called the Unified Starfront. It was not an empire and had no single ruler. Instead, it was a web of civilizations that had learned to stand on their own, while working together. Though Earth had never claimed ownership over any planet, its influence was visible in every corner of this new frontier, in the solar farms developed from human blueprints, the education systems built around problem-solving and action, and in the spaceports filled with alien voices quoting old human phrases about trying, failing, fixing, and moving forward.
Yes.
At the heart of many of these places were quiet memorials, not made of gold or guarded by soldiers, but shaped from stone, metal, or light. They bore the name of Captain Mara Voss, now considered a legend across 3 sectors. She was remembered not as a war hero or ruler, but as a symbol of motion, the catalyst of change. Her face stood carved on alien moons, her story taught in alien schools, not because she conquered, but because she inspired. Stories of the ISS endeavor had grown over time, retold in different languages, often changing in the small details, but always carrying the same message. The humans had not waited, and because of that, the stars had moved. For many, it was hard to imagine the time before that shift, before quick action and shared knowledge replaced the long, slow chains of permission and delay. The new generation across the galaxy didn't grow up afraid to act. They were born into a culture of trying things, building together, and solving problems without always waiting for perfect conditions. It wasn't chaos, it was progress. And this mindset, once rare, had now become the center of the galaxy's new identity. Strangely, Earth itself had changed the least. Most people there still lived ordinary lives, farming, inventing, creating, and helping wherever they could. They hadn't set out to lead the galaxy or reshape its future. They just acted when something needed to be done. That very habit, unnoticed by many on Earth, had turned them into a quiet force of change. Meanwhile, in a small archive station, orbiting a neutral world, a historian played a restored message from Captain Voss's final recorded transmission. Her voice, still calm and steady after a century, echoed through the chamber. The galaxy was never broken. It just needed a spark to remember it could move. That message was now considered the spark itself. And across the stars, wherever, people worked together without waiting for orders. Whenever someone built a solution without fearing the rules, the story lived on. People no longer said, "Let's wait and see." Instead, they asked, "What can we do now?" The legacy of the uninvited had become a foundation for generations to come. It wasn't dominance. It wasn't control. It was momentum unstoppable, shared and freely chosen. In a galaxy that once stalled in silence and hesitation, the story was now carved into the minds of billions. They didn't wait. They acted. And in doing so, they taught the stars to move.